Well, this is quite a complicated technique, so I've got the aid of a diagram to help me explain. This is the TI here. This is a representation, greatly enlarged, of the TI's brain. And these are paraliminal transmissions. These are ordinary people, such as you and I, non-TIs, stood around. There's a young lad saying something to his father. There's the bus now. His father's replying, run, run. Again, real people, real comments in the vicinity of the TI. I'm going to explain how the TI's brain has been rewired to hear within the TI's brain the paraliminal transmissions, but heard from people, say, 30 foot away. So what the TI is hearing when this technique is accomplished is the programmed paraliminal transmissions that are occurring exactly at the same time as the people just 30 foot away that just happen to be in the vicinity. The TI can hear this. This is quite loud. So what is happening here is whatever the TI can hear that is most prominent, that comes to their attention, they won't hear, if this transmission is going on, they won't hear these people saying what they're really saying. They will hear these words that are done in the paraliminal transmissions. First of all, I'll explain, just in case you don't know, what a paraliminal is. Paraliminal is three or more voices that overlap at the same time, and they could be commands, words, phrases, but they're said exactly at the same time. They're three different voices, and because they all overlap, they sound just like background noise to the conscious mind. You can't make out what they're saying, but the subconscious can. What's happening here? How do we get the TI to hear from what the TI believes are people in their vicinity? Very, very offensive, insulting comments that are particular to the TI and which the TI hears over and over again. How do we convince the TI that these people are saying these offensive comments? How do we do that? We do that by remapping the TI's brain. How is the TI's brain? What does that mean? Okay. My understanding of this, these paraliminal transmissions, which I've said, are three voices which occur exactly at the same time. They all overlap, so the TI's conscious mind cannot make them out. The TI has been sensitized consciously to these, but what's more important is they have been embedded. These comments, commands have been embedded in the TI's brain over time. So what's happened is in the TI's brain, stronger connections through priming, which is the constant input of these words and phrases into the TI subconscious. So through priming, which has embedded these comments and these associations to these comments within the subconscious, that's forged stronger neural pathways, so that then those neural pathways, when triggered, will now take priority over the word part of the brain. What's happening is that the part of the brain that deals with language and words recruits neurons assigned to words and they are specific to words. And the neurons, the part of the brain that deals with sound, I'm talking about words and sound, I'm separating them because that is just how the technique works. The part that is to do with sound, you hear a piano, that's sound, isn't it? It's not saying any words. You hear voices. You can just say, if you don't understand the language, you won't, you'll process it differently. So it's sound. Talk about sound. So that part that processes sound is different. Part of the brain, it's different neurons are recruited to process sound as to process words. The two make a pathway so that the words and sound are perceived at the same time, normally. But this rewiring and the use of these paraliminals calls up the neurons to sound so that the group of people here speaking, the sound of the voice is heard. The audio, the sound goes straight into the brain. So the sound is heard as sound. The frequencies, the pitch, etc. is heard as sound, and the brain processes that sound. Those neurons that are assigned to sound are called up, and they process this sound. So it can be identified as that sound that is coming from over there. That's something else with the sound there, yeah? Very distinctive. It is definitely the sound of these people, not the paraliminals. So the sound of the group is heard, but the processing of words part of the brain, this input, this paraliminal transmission, the words within this, because they've been embedded through prior priming in the subconscious, the pathway is stronger once triggered. And that's what these paraliminal transmissions are. They trigger activation to make the brain behave in a completely different way, so that now the words that are transmitted in the paraliminal transmissions take priority in the TIs. What they hear, they believe they're hearing these words in this sound, which will translate to they hear these people saying these words. So the paraliminal transmitted words take priority, and the neurons assigned to these words are called up. The normal pathway of the brain that processes sound and words heard is stronger. This is much stronger, and it takes priority. There's an overlapping of areas in the brain, and neurons that should fire, such as these ones, to do with these people, what words are saying don't, because this is a stronger input. It's a stronger transmission. These things have already been embedded in the subconscious through priming, and this trigger reorganizes the way that the brain works. There's an overlapping of areas, and like I said, neurons fire that shouldn't really fire. The neurons that are assigned to the paraliminals substitute completely the words here, because this is a stronger input. It just overpowers the word part of the brain at that point. and the neural pathways, once triggered here, just click into action. In a way, the paraliminal transmission at the time it's being done is because it's like another compartment of the brain, because it's linked into the brain wirelessly by frequency, and it alters the way it processes things completely, like a kind of add-on that communicates wirelessly. You know, like, this is how it, if you have a device such as, let me think now, you have a CD player and it plays CDs. Right, if you plug into the USB MP3 player, that will take priority over the CD player. Yeah? In this example. I'm not saying this is true of all CD players, but in this example, you have a CD player, and when it plays CDs, you don't plug anything else into it, it plays CDs, how it's designed to do. But it has got an extra input, and this is a parallel to this, that when plugged in, which in this example is the paraliminal transmission, but it's connected wirelessly, that will take priority. When you plug the MP3 player in, that takes priority. Now, the CD player operates in a completely different way. And that is what this is like. It's like a kind of add-on, which when connected to the brain by a transmission, it changes the way the brain processes words and how it connects words to sounds that are occurring in the environment. This remapping may also explain how TIs can hear sounds and words, comments in running water and car engines. Each different part of the brain has its own frequency oscillation when it's healthy, and these all combine to create what is known as the sum total of the brain oscillation. So then we say it's theta or it's delta or whatever, but that isn't all. That is the sum total of all the different parts. For instance, the auditory cortex is normally where alpha rhythms are. So, as entrainment is used in many of these mind control techniques, it's very likely that the auditory cortex and the word association areas of the brain are entrained, obviously, so neurons fire or fail to fire on certain triggers, as well as theta and gamma replacing alpha, because that could assist in causing neurons specific to the paraliminal triggers, especially theta, which is a kind of hypnotic state of the brain where it's more susceptible to input to the subconscious, and that could perhaps promote the triggers to get the neurons to fire. Obviously, a stronger to the brain input that takes priority, so the brain is entrained to operate from this, could be due to interfering with theta and gamma, because that would affect the firing of neurons and how the brain processes sound. So this technique is a very invasive way, without being invasive. I don't know if a brain implant or implants in the auditory system or even if some disabling of the brain by some kind of controlled injury has been carried out, so that these will override this. But it's only on the occasions when these transmissions occur, these paraliminal transmissions occur, that this actually happens. Otherwise, the TI would be hearing these things in just normal speech by people that they're having a conversation with all the time, and not just in particular instances. It's my estimation that this is a technique that is being used to keep people out of areas they don't want them to go in, or causing them to become some kind of false flag person or something. It can be used in many ways. This is part one. In part two, I'll describe my experiences of this system and how it is distant dependent, so that these paraliminal transmissions that are stronger and that take priority cut off. When the TI goes towards the perceived source of the sound, that is where the auditory system and their brain is telling them the sound is coming from, the people that are making the sound. The sound is very accurate, but the actual intel isn't in this technique, what I'm discussing. So it's distant dependent in that when the TI gets to a certain distance, closer, it cuts off. There's like a line, an invisible line there, where the transmission will just completely cut off. And in part two, I'll describe my experiences with this, and also several occasions where this has occurred, and also how I discovered the existence of these. Okay, thank you. God bless.